Hey, friend, are you feeling overwhelmed by emotions, especially in parenting, marriage, or work? Then listen up. I love helping women learn and implement powerful emotional management tools in a small group environment so they can handle everyday feelings with more calm, more clarity, and more confidence. It's called the Emotional Confidence Club. And right now, we're open to new members. If you're ready for more peace and less stress in your life, apply now for the Emotional Confidence Club at aliciamichelle.com/club. Hey there. Welcome to today's episode of the Christian Mindset Coach with me, Alicia Michelle. Last week, we started a topic series on disappointment. And I am covering these topics because a lot of us feel tired, we feel exhausted, and that may be from a busy schedule. But honestly, there might be some deeper things going on underneath, and disappointment is one of those big, deeper things that a lot of us are struggling with, and we're not even sure that we're struggling with it. So I wanted to really dig into this. The previous episode, 314, we talked about what it could look like, how to know if we're feeling disappointment underneath the surface. Today, we're going to talk about two specific places that if we are married and have kids, disappointment can be hiding in our motherhood, how we show up as a mom, and also in our marriage relationships. I almost called this episode When You Feel Like You're Failing Your Family, because that's how disappointment feels when you are carrying it in these areas of motherhood and in marriage. I have felt both different seasons of my marriage or in different seasons of my parenting, and it feels very hopeless. I feel sad. I feel like it's this ongoing thing that I get to get up and be a mom again tomorrow. I'm still in this marriage and we're still trying to sort things out. So it's can be really frustrating to struggle with these things, especially when they're so tender. Or maybe you feel like I've talked to this person about it and we've addressed it and still nothing's changing. And here I am still struggling with this. So many of us are stuck in these coping mechanisms, and we then beat ourselves up because we have these coping mechanisms. It's just this huge cycle. Today, I want to address these things and start bringing them out into the open so that we can begin to get healing. We can give you some relief. If the overwhelm and tiredness are at the surface, the quick to be angry, if all that's at the surface, then we have to address what's underneath. We don't want to just try to get more sleep or find a calm method in the moment when we're angry. I mean, those are helpful. But we want to get to the root. If I am struggling with not being able to sleep at night, it makes a lot more sense to figure out the cause behind why I can't sleep versus just saying, okay, I'm just going to take a sleeping pill and, try to cover it up. I'm covering all of this because I want to help you get to the root of this and to also invite you to join us in the Emotional Confidence Club, a membership that I host. We're taking disappointment in the months of July and August of 2025. We're taking that concept, we're going to be studying it for 6 weeks. We're going deep into it, talking about how it's showing up in our life in these different areas. Why it makes sense that it's there. We're going to talk about how to process it, simple ways to work through it with the Lord and to help our minds and our bodies work through what we're feeling, and then how to implement strategies to actually begin to make changes in these areas. And you'll be getting a playbook. And this is a collection of homework assignments it's like this slowly building project that we're doing over the 6 weeks that is going to have very specific things like, this is how I am working through this. This is my action for if this comes up, stuff like that, that I'm so excited because it's going to be not super, like it takes hours and hours of homework to do, but something that will be a very practical takeaway. And I'll be explaining more about the Emotional Confidence Club and why it's different and inviting you to be a part of it. But if you just even hearing this or like, yes, I I need something support like this, then I invite you to check it out. It's aliciamichelle.com/club. You'll learn more about the Emotional Confidence Club there, and you are invited to apply at that link. All right, let's talk about the specific disappointments that we carry in motherhood and marriage, because these are massive. A lot of us don't talk about this. We don't feel safe to go there. Yet today, you and me listening here, we're going to walk through this. And I want to try to normalize some of this for you. Again, not that we want to have these things happen, but I am going to help you to see that you're certainly not the only one if you do see it happening. The first part, let's talk about motherhood. There's two stories I want to tell. A couple of weeks ago, I had the honor to go up to South Dakota. It was really exciting. I went up to an area around where Mount Rushmore is and Custer State Park and had the opportunity to speak to a company. I also had the opportunity to share at a private retreat for a group of women. There was maybe 15 to 20 women at this retreat. And I remember so the retreat was on a Thursday night and Friday morning. I had two sessions with them. On Thursday night, there was a woman who felt torn about being there. She's like, I know I need to be here. I know I need to talk about this. Like, this is super important, but I also know that I'm missing my son's baseball game to be here. And so I was like going back and forth. Should I come? Should I not? And so like, she felt like I needed this emotional renewal. Like I needed to hear what you had to say, but I also feel like I'm letting my family down because I'm choosing myself. So raise your hand if we've ever felt like that as a mom. Oh my gosh, all the time, right? I can't tell you how many times I felt like that. We look at it and we go, which do I choose? We feel disappointed either way. We feel like we're letting someone down. We're letting the person in our family down. Like in this case, it was her son at the baseball game, or we feel like we're letting ourselves down. Now, whether or not we're letting that person down is another topic, but just the idea that it's there. All right. So as we shared that and as we began to, as I was talking to her, there were some other women nearby and man, like every single one of them said, I have been there. I understand. And I told her, you don't have to stay here if it would be more beneficial for you to go. We're glad you're here. We want you here, but I want you to have the freedom to do what you feel is best and what God's calling you to do in this moment. The second story is this quiet load of guilt and disappointment that we carry in the high standards that we seek as moms. This was another client that I'm working with around dealing with expectations and how she can work through the idea of shame in her parenting, in her motherhood, in herself, just in general. She was sharing with me how when she was doing an emotional check-in for the week, she had a rough weekend because she had some tough parenting moments with her kids and responded in a way that she's like, I know I should have responded differently. And she began really shaming herself. But the victory for her was she began shaming herself, but then she realized this is not what I want. This is not who I am anymore. I want to respond differently. I want to notice it, but then get to the root of it and use some of the tools that we've been working with in coaching. So it was really encouraging to hear that. But I bring this up because so many of us have this load of guilt and disappointment in ourselves because we think, well, I know what to do. I should have done this differently. I know that that's what always frustrates me. And I let myself get there again. And here I am, right? We can just go down this whole rabbit trail of flagging ourselves with a whip because we're like, I know better. I should have. I want to be this. What's wrong with me? The devil can get in there and just really twist that. So those are two big ones in our parenting, then how it can show up. Now, what does disappointment look like in marriage? Oh my goodness, lots of areas that we could have this show up. I'm going to share 5 statements because this can go 1,000 directions in terms of how we feel disappointment in ourselves, disappointment in the other person, of course, disappointment in where our marriage should be, quote unquote, should, in terms of growth, spiritual connection, intimacy, or things we could have done together. There's so many opportunities for disappointment that could be there. So I'm not even going to touch all of those. I am just going to touch the ones related to us where we feel like I should be, right? It should be this way. And I'm not. And so I'm disappointed in myself. Let me address 5 of those. The first one is I should be more patient. I should be less reactive. We feel shame over shutting down, not handling conflict, quote, better. That's kind of like what that same feeling was a second ago with my coaching client who was talking about knowing how to handle the parenting situation, but not doing it in the moment, feeling shame about that. Another one in disappointment in marriage, it could sound like I should be more grateful instead of wanting more. This is one where we can talk ourselves out of addressing something that's important that needs to be talked about in a relationship because we think, oh, but this is good. How can I ask for more? I feel guilty for wanting deeper connection, more communication, more affection. And that's going to have to be between you and the Lord as to whether or not you actively address that in your marriage. But we feel disappointed in that and we're not quite sure what to do with it. So all of these are kind of related to feeling let down in some areas and feeling confused about how to handle it. Another one is kind of similar to that one we just mentioned, but I should be able to make this work without complaining. If we feel like if we're expressing disappointment or dissatisfaction, then we're a failure, or that the marriage is a failure, or that we have this thing in our head that says it's only good if, right? We can't have any sort of negative thoughts or even any issues that need to be addressed if it's a quote good marriage. That fuels this disappointment because when we don't know what to do with it, it's just kind of sitting there. It's this grief, this dissatisfaction that's not being addressed. Here's another one. Number 4, ways disappointment can show up again from our perspective of feeling it inside. But we might think if I were a better wife, then he wouldn't be distant, stressed, passive. He wouldn't be having these actions if I were different in these ways. Like it's my fault, taking on the burden for everyone. This is definitely something that we see for those of us who grew up being the good girl, the one who just did everything she could to keep the peace in a relationship. She would take on every emotion, just I'll deal with it myself. It's my fault that this turned out this way. Well, you know what? Sometimes it is our fault that it turned out this way. And maybe we do need to be different in certain areas, but ultimately people are responsible for their own way they interact with us. They're responsible for their own emotions. And we, in this sort of situation where we're feeling that disappointment, we're falsely taking responsibility. Like we don't need to take responsibility for our husband's emotional state or his actions. That's his responsibility to own. We can influence them as a wife. We get to obviously change how we act. And if we change how we act, it may affect him. But we ultimately need to let that disappointment go. And then the last one that we can think, again, there's lots of them, but these are just some as examples. We might think, well, I'm the one who always brings up the hard stuff. So maybe it's me. Maybe I just need to get over it. Maybe I just need to stop being so frustrated. And so we dismiss the disappointment in that way. It's again, we feel like we're the burden. We're nitpicking. We feel like we're too sensitive. If you've ever heard any of these things before, this can kind of work against what God might be doing in revealing there is a disappointment. And this is something that in a healthy relationship might need to be addressed. And it might even be in some of these situations, things that might be indicators of a relationship with God issue, so to speak. The things that we're looking for may not be able to be fulfilled in marriage. It might be a deeper disappointment that we're feeling. Those are some common things. There's a whole gamut of disappointment in marriage where we're disappointed in how things could have been or we thought could have been. But when we're talking about this disappointment that it's coming from us, that we're the cause, there is so much behind it, so much evidence of reasons why it could be happening. A lot of us are our own harshest critic. So we have this really high standard, and that's noble. That's good. God wants us to have high standards for how we live. We're called to live in righteousness, to be people who seek love, to seek peace, who seek faith. I was just reading about that this morning in 2 Timothy chapter 1. I love 2 Timothy, by the way. But that concept of these are things we have to seek. Yet within that, we also live under the banner of grace. If we feel disappointment in these areas, we're not letting that high level of excellence turn into a bashing session of ourselves. When our actions don't match our desires, we can start to believe that we are the problem that is the only problem. We may be the problem. Like we may need to address those things, but we're taking on all the burden. And instead of changing, we just stay stuck in this shame that the disappointment can bring in. And that gets heavy. That gets heavy really quickly because we're not meant to carry all of that. And by the way, we're not meant to carry any of it, even if it does belong to us. We take responsibility for it. We own it. We say that it's things we're feeling, and then we invite God into it. And I know that even in this conversation, it's hard to go through what that process can look like. And that's why I have things like the Emotional Confidence Club, honestly, because I want to be able to offer women who want to go deeper here to know, what does that look like in real life? I don't want to just say, like, sometimes you hear from other Christians, we'll hear things like, well, just give it to God, or just let God take care of it. How? How does that happen? So again, for those of you who want to go deeper in this area, that's why we have the Emotional Confidence Club. Hey there, it's Alicia. Do you love the science and scripture-based tools that we talk about here on the show, but want some accountability and practical help applying these principles to your life? Well, then you're invited to apply for the Emotional Confidence Club. I like to think of the club as the lab where we implement the tools that we talk about here and in my book, Emotional Confidence. Imagine having the chance to interact with me live every week as you practice the 7 emotional management tools in our roadmap to help you manage emotions like fear, anxiety, guilt, shame, anger, and more. I love watching the lives of the women in the club transform in incredible ways, moving from overwhelmed and frustrated to calm and confident. You too can learn how to make these truths applicable to your situations and find emotional peace despite life's ongoing stress. Right now, we are welcoming in new members, but it is by application only. Does this sort of accountability, growth, and caring support as you apply these tools to your life, does that sound good to you? Then apply now for the Emotional Confidence Club at aliciamichelle.com/club. That's aliciamichelle.com/club. So where does disappointment really come from? We often feel like the disappointment comes from these being harsher critics, but we don't even realize sometimes that we have created these false images of who we're supposed to be. And we have these perfect images of ourselves, like the patient mom, I'm supposed to be organized mom, the emotionally present mom, I'm supposed to be there for every baseball game like that other mom. And we don't even realize, where did that come from? That may have come from, well, I saw this modeled that this is what my mom seemed to be, or this is what was told to me, that in order to be a good mom, I needed to be that way. Or maybe your mom wasn't that way, and now you're trying to compensate for that because you know what that's like. It can come from lots of different ways. So starting to understand, where does this tendency to blame myself and to carry this disappointment, where could that be coming from? Because we don't want to create this cycle of shaming ourselves for not being that way and then having doubt in our ability as a mom, as a wife, because then we're overcompensating, and then that leads to burnout and more disappointment. This kind of happened to me in terms of mothering right after I began growing in this area of emotions. In 2017, many of you know, I had a huge medical crisis that nearly took my life, but it was the result of not dealing with my emotions and not processing them for years and years. And I'm not going to get into that whole story here. You can read more about it in the Emotional Confidence book. I also have, I think it's episode 125, where we talk about that story. But that's to say that as God moved me past that episode and I realized I needed to learn how to deal with my emotions, began becoming trained as a coach, became certified as a neuro coach, I realized that, wow, I now have these skills and it's making a big difference in how I show up. I want to be really applying these concepts to how I relate to my kids. And I want to make sure that they have these tools. I felt like I maybe was encouraging them in some of the bad habits that I had. Just stuff down these emotions, don't deal with them, just keep going. Whether I did that obviously or not, I did not want that to be something that they struggled with. I went through a period of adjusting to, now that I have these tools, how do I do this in a healthy way where I am helping my kids carry these? I went to the other side where I was trying to over help them, if that makes sense. It was an overcompensation of, let me really make sure that you're processing this. Let me really make sure you're feeling this. And that wasn't good either. In figuring out how to deal with disappointment, how to work through different things, it's okay to not be perfect in the process of it. We can just be aware. That's always the first part, awareness. because we don't want to keep that cycle going of shame and self-doubt and then overcompensating and then burnout, which leads to more disappointment. This idea of seeing where it comes from in our life, seeing how we may be carrying that pattern through even to other people, especially in motherhood and marriage, is so important. So, what if we just started talking about this? What if we said it out loud? You know what? I feel like I'm disappointing everyone, including myself. What if we felt comfortable enough to bring that into a conversation with the people who we feel like we're disappointing or letting down? I had this happen to me about 3 years ago. After going through this time of learning about emotions, I found that I started feeling all of the emotions, probably too much, right? Like you spend your whole life without being able to hear, and then suddenly somebody gives you hearing aids and you're like, oh my gosh, I hear so much. So I felt overly sensitive. And I still sometimes struggle with, am I being too sensitive about this or not? But I went through a period, again, of going through all of this where I needed to go to my family because I felt like an immense disappointment as a parent, especially. And I had an honest conversation with my kids. Now, my kids are older, so they're older teens and in early 20s. But I just said, I want you guys to be honest with me because I had this dialogue in my head of I am this, all these ways to describe how I was letting them down, being a disappointment, being a failure. I'd let this kind of all build. And I said, I want you to answer me honestly. Do you feel like this is how you see me? Because these are some of the things I am sensing. And those are the dialogues that I'm telling myself. And I want you to be honest with me. And I mean, you ask your kids, they're going to be honest. I think there was like 90% of the things that I was saying were just like stuff that I'd made up in my head. There was a few things where they're like, mom, I think there's an area that we could work on in terms of our relationship. But no, I don't feel like you're doing this, or I don't feel like this is true about how you are as a mom, things like that. But my point is, if you feel safe and if you are wanting to get a reality check for some of these things, it can be very helpful to say, am I disappointing you to that other person in marriage or in parenting? So to conclude, we start healing as we begin to have language for disappointment. We begin to see it, look at it, work through it with the Lord, process where it came from. Even like in that last example, if we feel like it's helpful and we feel comfortable and safe, perhaps even bringing it up with family. And I know that whole process is extremely daunting. It can feel like, I don't even know what that looks like. How do I do that well? That's scary to think about. And again, that is why we are covering this topic for 6 weeks in the Emotional Confidence Club in July and August of 2025. I'm doing these episodes on disappointment because I want to call in those women who are struggling with disappointment, especially in today's episode, the areas of motherhood and marriage, and who are saying, you know what, I don't want to be under the burden of this anymore. I recognize that I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, that this is sucking the life out of me and out of these relationships. I know that I can be better and God can heal me in these areas, and I want to do that work. So if that's you, I invite you to join us in the Emotional Confidence Club. How it works is we will cover one topic for 6 weeks. Again, July and August, we're covering healing from disappointment. And we have a week by week schedule where it's not overwhelming. We have a meeting a week and a forum where we can talk and do different things. That's a private forum. But we either have a teaching time with me or you will meet within a small group. We will have a corporate teaching time where there will be, all of us together as a group, but then we are breaking women down into groups of 7 to 10 who can go deep in this. If you're in a women's Bible study, you all go through the book together, but you break down into small tables and get to know those ladies. My hope is that you will feel safe to be able to share and to build these bonds with these women so that you're actually getting the accountability, encouragement, and trust from other people, which is so crucial as you're going through this. And then, as we said, there are these faith-based tools in our emotional confidence playbook that you'll get for every one of these topics that we cover that are very practical. You will have specific action items. When this comes up, this is how I'm going to respond. These might be some causes behind it. You'll just have this really concise playbook that will be the perfect companion for each of these topics. I can't wait to even have women in there who have been there for 6 months or a year. In 6 months, we will cover 3 big topics in great depth. Can you imagine the transformation that's going to be coming? I'm so excited. If this all resonates with you and you're looking for something like this, you're invited to join us and apply. It is aliciamichelle.com/club. All right. I look forward to continuing our conversations next week. Take care, friend. Bye-bye.